Disclaimer. This podcast features a conversation between two individuals regarding assistive technology. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed during this episode belong solely to the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. Furthermore, this discussion is for informational purposes only.
Hi, welcome to Assistive Tech Today Podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Livoti, and today we have a special guest. And I always say my guests are special, and they are, because I appreciate them for what they do and what they bring to the podcast. And this young lady is no exception. Without further ado, the lovely Katherine Pack. Welcome to Assistive Tech Today Podcast, Katherine.
I appreciate that, Vinny. Thank you for having me.
So Katherine is a VP of Sales for Senior Living, Senior Living SaaS. And Katherine and I have met on LinkedIn. We've conversed a lot, and I just figured Katherine deals with senior living, which is very important. You know, we deal with assistive tech, but we also deal with the aging. So I said, Katherine, I'd love to have you on the podcast to basically share what you do and talk about it. Would be helpful to some of the listeners and viewers. And also, Katherine is a new author. She has a Katherine Senior Living Sales Playbook, which is on Amazon now in paperback. So I'm going to turn it over to Katherine and let her basically tell us a little bit about herself and, what she does and what she's wrote her book about.
Oh, thank you for the great intro. So yeah, I'm a sales leader in the senior living space. And most recently, I've been doing consulting and acting as a fractional go-to-market expert for early stage senior living SaaS startups. And I come in and build really your sales process, the commercial system for the founder typically. So that's buyer room mapping, pricing, sales process overall. And that's really the whole architect behind the sales playbook. So the sales playbook really started as just a way for me to kind of write out my thoughts. I've been in sales for so long. I've been in sales since I was in college, so 15 plus years now. I don't want to give my age away. But I put a lot of focus on what does a sales leader need to do, and then what is industry specific. And then I just wanted to write it out. And then it turned into a series that I was posting on LinkedIn, and it got really great feedback. And so then I took all of those guides and put them into a book that you can now find on Amazon. And while it is senior housing specific, it really is just specific for any sales people who are really focusing on really the human aspect of sales, but also process, ton of process, trying to give you a good guide on how to leverage both process and really empathy sales, which is what I kind of call it.
Yeah, I mean, this industry, like I said, we intersect with, it's about sales, but, it's the human aspect of it. That's one thing that you cannot detach no matter what, with all the technology we have. At the end of the day, it's a human connection. Like you said, it's empathetic sales. This is somebody's, you're dealing with somebody's loved ones, maybe their mom or dad, they have maybe dementia or Alzheimer's or some other illness, and they need to be put into senior living. So, again, you have to have empathy, because we all are going to age, and hopefully we live, long, fruitful lives and healthy ones. But, these are important things to know about. And like you said, just to do it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like to counter senior housing. While a lot of times folks moving into senior housing, it's prompted by like a fall or maybe a hospital visit, but senior housing has an array of different care levels. So it's not just for folks who are ailing in some way. It's actually also for the independent folks who want community and want structure and friends and events. So I'm trying to change the narrative of senior living.
Like, you mean like, I know, like with assisted living, or I know my great uncle, he lived to 103, God bless. He was driving up until his late 90s. He had a stick shift Mazda, which was RX-7. He was still active, but he was getting older and he didn't have any close family members, but he wanted to live in a community with, like you said, other people. More, too, for the social aspect of it. He'd go out and go to the grocery store, but he had support if he needed it, and camaraderie for people his own age, and just to keep that mind going, to be active and enjoy his golden years, so to speak, which, like
Yeah.
you said, it's more diverse than just obviously because if somebody has an ailment or a fall or an injury.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just we're all going to age. Where do you want to be as you age? It doesn't have to be because you're sick or ailing in some way, right? I think community is the biggest selling point. If you've ever been into a senior living community, you can see that there's a lot of heart and community and thought behind processing the engagement of the residents and making sure they're happy and want to stay.
Right, right. Yeah, I know somebody that was in one. They were like, they have their hairdresser come and they get their hair done, and it's just like, it's like you said, it's just a good, you set up a good environment for them to enjoy their retirement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what would you like to dive into? You want to dive into the book a little bit, or any, some of the key things that would be important for somebody who's doing sales in this, in this area, like the pet peeves or things you should be checking off, that, your basics that are very important.
Yeah. So some of the thoughts I had of things we could really dive into are focusing on obviously technology, but like how does it get adopted? What is the process to get people engaged, right? So understanding what that looks like too.
Mhm.
Would you like for me to expand on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So
You have the
my
floor.
thoughts,
You have the
well,
floor, so to speak.
when we're talking through what great technology is, why it succeeds, gets adopted, in senior housing and really in any type of sales that you're doing where you really do need to be a human before you're anything else, making sure things get adopted. I can get a contract signed, right? I can get the executive buy-in. But how are you making sure it's actually getting adopted? So how are you making sure that folks are actually utilizing it? And that's where I put a lot of thought on who at the ground floor would be utilizing my software, my technology. And how can I make sure that it's as easy for them to use as possible? Because when there's a gap between the executive buy-in and the actual user of the software, it's rarely the technology itself. It's almost always a communication error or not making sure that adoption is happening on the front line. So, yes, I can have a great software, it gives these executives all the data they need to make great decisions. Finance folks love it. But if my clinical staff on the ground floor aren't utilizing it, or if my sales folks aren't utilizing it how they need to, that is where you are actually coming into the problem, right? So
Right.
making sure that's being adopted by not just the higher ups, but the folks on the ground level, not because they're the ones who are signing the contract or paying the bills, but because they will guarantee longevity.
Right.
If it's working for them, it will work for you longer term. And folks don't like to change things when it's working. So making sure that it's working for them, getting feedback from those folks on the ground floor is key to really any type of sales, but especially in senior housing or really anything where you're dealing with human life.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, yeah, these people are kind of like the front line, so to speak. They're the connection, they're the image, of the company, because they're dealing with the people one on one. And like you said, obviously, if there's great tools and they're not utilizing, or they're not doing it properly or implementing it, then it just doesn't make a good experience all around.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it happen. I've seen executives make decisions for folks, and I mean, on the clinical side, this happens a lot. Finance makes decisions for most of the company almost always if they are given the floor. And so I've seen folks kind of get derailed and it always comes back around. So if you don't make sure you're getting the buy-in from the right folks, it's always going to come back to bite you. It just saves everybody time and money if you make sure you get the buy-in from the beginning.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, you have to have a system, and like you said, it has to be easy. And just from dealing with what I do, I know change is always tough. People don't like change. So if it's difficult, or it's not intuitive, or if it's not user friendly, nobody wants to deal with it because they're, we're kind of creatures of habit, Hey, if it works, why do I have to do something else? But with so much technology, there's things that'll make you work smarter, not harder, and just give you, a better end product to present to people, and just streamline the process, allow you to be able to do other tasks that are not mundane, that acquire that, special attention, whereas some things are just mechanical. They just need to be done. And, with automation, I know we always talk a lot on this podcast about, I do a lot of stuff on software for like pathologists, occupational therapists, PTs. They only have so much time with their patients, or their students, and if they have to be, in piles of paperwork for mundane things, that takes away from either them doing, background work that they need to do, or focusing on the patient as much. So, this kind of gives them, and especially if they're sole practitioners where they don't have a staff, they're like doing everything. It's good software to help manage this stuff, makes the job better. And it also, in the end, the person who needs the therapy is going to get, undivided attention and get the best possible outcome, because the therapist is focused. And just like you said, with the salespeople, if they get all the information and they're able to do this, their job's going to be more efficient. It's going to be implemented properly, and it's going to be a good overall experience. That's my, my take on it.
No, 100%. Keep it simple, stupid is,
Yep. The KISS method. Yep.
Yeah, the KISS method. I think about it a lot though, because I have seen really good software not fail, but struggle because it's overly complicated. And I've seen folks with less features, less bells and whistles succeed because it's
Hmm.
easy to use, it's intuitive, which are almost buzzwords in software. But
Right.
genuinely, people want to be able to see everything on one screen or minimal clicking. So being able to understand that is a big feat. Whereas sometimes founders get really excited, because I work with a lot of startups. They get really excited about their product and they want to kind of show you every feature there possibly is. But if you less is more a lot of times.
Right.
And so showing what would make their day-to-day easier, and then get into the weeds as need be, right? Like get into the weeds of what data you can get. But ultimately, I want to show simplicity and how
Right.
easy it is for my folks to use it on the ground floor. So then it trickles up to the data that I need for my executives to make decisions.
No, that's so true. And that, like you said, it goes with any kind of sales. I mean, I've worked in many different sales arenas. If you give people too many options that they don't need, they get confused. They don't, distill it down, get to your core stuff that the meat and potatoes, so to speak, what you need on a day-to-day basis. And yes, by the way, if you need these specialized, reports, the software can do this, we can dial it in, but you got to get the fundamentals down, and then all that other stuff is just gravy. It's
Absolutely.
trying to
And
use those food analogies, but it works.
no, I think you're absolutely right. And it's important to understand all of the different folks who are affected, but the way you do that is with good discovery. And I think discovery calls that before you actually jump into technology, that is probably the single most important phone call or meeting that you have of the entire process, in
Right.
my opinion.
Hmm.
And some folks really they underestimate this. They try to rush through it. Like, let me just kind of check off some boxes of questions I need to ask. But that's really not the best way to do it. And I get it that we think that we have the best product. Let me just jump into the product, sure. But your passion project is not their problem. So understanding what the actual problem is, who's involved. I worked at a company where we sold, I think, 13 different pieces of software, from
Hmm.
operations, from your sales, your clinical, your finance, business intelligence. I mean, it was a ton of things. And a lot of times folks they would reach out, I want to see a CRM. And in that initial discovery call, they find out that I do all these other things. So that actually changes the entire next phone call, because they're like, oh, actually, we do need help with our leasing.
Right.
Actually, we do need help with our EMR. Understanding what you can show them, using a discovery as a place to kind of pitch, right? But it's
Hmm.
low stakes because you're just
Yeah.
asking questions. You're trying to
Hmm.
give them a little bit of background about you. There's no pressure at all. At least
Right.
I don't feel so, right? I'm not pressuring them to do anything. I'm just telling them what I do. They're telling them what they need. We're talking back and forth, and then I can proceed appropriately because I know what they want. And I also can set them up for success too, because I can tell them, hey, these are the folks you probably want on the call if we're going to talk about this. I can also set it up for secondary calls a lot of times too. So, hey, this first call, we're going to touch on these features, this product. Next call, we'll do this. It actually helps me prepare for the entire sales process of it by
Right.
having that one call. And also building rapport. It's so silly, but
Right.
we are all humans. We just want to talk to
Right.
each other. And so people
Right.
want to feel heard, and that is the time to do it. So if I could give a piece of advice to anybody, do not skip discovery calls. Do not treat it like a checkbox. Yes, you have questions you need answered, but use it as a time for light pitching, understanding their needs, their pain points, their wishes, but then also being able to set you up for the entire sales process. You're setting
Right.
expectations.
You got to be a good listener. You got to
Absolutely.
listen to your client or your customer. And like you said, listen to what their needs are. And then you know your expertise, you know where you can and can't help them.
Well,
And like,
and also going into personas, right? We talked a little bit about my book, and I don't want to sit here and pitch it all day. That's not the goal. But I talk a lot about who you're selling to, and you're changing your wording, you're changing your entire, I think, strategy based on who you're talking to. So if I'm talking to the head of IT, I'm talking to him differently than I'm talking to a head of clinical. Same
right,
with head of sales versus head of finance. I like to make a joke that nobody intimidates me like a CFO. And that's because you have to really, my charm doesn't work on them. I really
right,
need to give specifics and show them true ROI. And
right,
understanding how you're talking to folks can really determine the next steps of the process too. And it also,
right,
you have credibility or not.
right. Yeah, you have to meet people on their playing field and you have to speak to them in like you said, in the arena that they're going to be comfortable with. Like you
Absolutely.
said, IT is not the same as a clinician is.
No, and they're what they want and need are
They're
different.
totally different. Absolutely.
And the way that they respond, like I kind of in my mind give everybody a high level. It's almost like they have an icon in my head. And my clinical folks are really they're thinking they're the most empathetic of them all, but they're still very strict
Hmm.
because they have to have things moving, they have to have things moving quickly, but they also need things to be accurate. So efficiency and accuracy, but also heart all mixed in one is what my clinical leaders want. Finance folks, they in my industry, everyone's a caregiver because we're in senior housing.
Right.
Everybody's a caregiver. Finance is also a caregiver, but again, at the end of the day, they're thinking about my dollars, my bottom line. So making
Hmm.
sure that I show them what ROI looks like and also showing them what that looks like for each individual community, how it impacts the residents. But at the end of the day, I need to give them numbers.
Right.
So making sure you're tailoring your pitch and your strategy to who you're talking to is super important. And that's any sales. That's not just obviously senior living.
Sure. And it's funny, just to touch a note on, for where I work, my current job now is I remember when I met the CEO of the company, who's the founder, he interviewed me for the job. And he said, when you come here, you're going to be dealing with people that have PhDs, you're going to be dealing with therapists, doctors, and you're going to be dealing with parents who just found out, their kid has cerebral palsy or some other special needs. And he's like, can you talk to people like that? And I said, I think I'm a good people person first because I'm a good
Yeah.
listener. And
Mhm.
I said, yes, I could. I can do that. And obviously I've been doing it for 24 years, so I guess I'm doing okay. But you have to shift gears. You have to, like you said, you have to know to give them what they need. So
Yeah.
again, I always say, always be a good listener.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which seems silly, but I also think that for a lot of times, even in my own career in the beginning, I, I would talk more than I would listen. And now it's totally the opposite. I can sit back and listen because people will tell you what they want.
Hmm.
And they will tell you they'll tell you their fears if you listen. So you really just need to listen to understand their wants, their needs, their fears. People don't want to look bad in front of their bosses. So understanding what that looks like, how can I make sure that you look good? How can I do that? And
Right,
I'm
right,
listening to you based on what you're telling me, and I will help you in any way I possibly can because I want us all to win.
right. Yeah, I mean, success is the key. Obviously, You want to keep selling, you want to keep promoting. So, and word of mouth too, people have good experience. They'll talk to other people, say, hey, we use Katherine. She has great software and she's really good and she really listens to what we need and basically doesn't sell us stuff that we don't need. That's the other thing too with sales. Don't sell things, don't sell things to people that they don't need, because it's going to turn around and it's not going to be good for you, because you're like, oh, they sold me all this stuff. I never really needed this. I really needed XYZ.
Mhm.
So,
I never tried to, what is this saying, square peg in a round hole. I never really tried to do that,
right,
because especially if you sell enterprise software, I can find something that you need
right,
probably. But either way, if it's not a good fit long term, then I don't want to do it, because it ruins my reputation ultimately, because
absolutely.
it means I'm not a good listener. It means that I'm selling you something you don't need. And because sales is a relationship business in a lot of ways, and especially in my industry, it's very incestuous. Folks go to different companies all the
Hmm.
time, and what has worked out in my favor is a great client will go to a different company and they'll call me up. But if they go to a different company and they don't call me up, it's because I might have failed them, right? So I never want that to
Right.
happen, and I never want people to not trust me, because at the end of the day, I'm going off the information I have too. So I'm hoping that we've done enough discovery. I'm hoping that we've prepared ourselves that that would never happen. It can
Hmm.
happen no matter what, but also just being proactive, like being
Right.
available. And I don't I think the reason that I've been successful is because I care about every aspect of the deal, but even beyond that. So when implementation happens in enterprise sales, implementation could take 6 months. I mean, there's just so many aspects to it. So I am always available during that entire time. And my clients, whether this is a blessing or a curse, always feel comfortable to come to me to complain, because they know I will advocate for them.
Hmm.
I will advocate for them. Hey, this is not what we agreed to. I will also try to protect them by making sure that things, if there's something specific, and especially with startups, you're consistently building. And
Hmm.
I never want to promise something will be ready if it's not ready. And if I do promise it, I'll write it in the contract for you, because I will write it that we agree to do this because we do. And that helps protect everybody involved.
Right. Sometimes too with startups, because I've done some tech testing for some startups. Sometimes they, depending on how much due diligence they did when they started their startup, they may, as things evolve, 6 months ago, they might not needed, XYZ, and now they do, because things have changed. The game's always shifting. It's like, it's always good to have good relationships, like you said, with your company, that you can help them if there is a, hey, they feel comfortable to talk to you. Hey, you know what? We're running into this now, and you
Absolutely.
obviously could, maybe offer them something that would help them. Um, I was watching you the other day. You were actually on somebody's podcast and you were talking about, don't, not wasting people's time, either your time or their time. Like, you're not a high pressure salesperson, you're not going to try and sell something to somebody they don't need, but, you know, sometimes you get these cold calls and, people are afraid to just tell you, hey, I'm not really interested. Like you said, a hard no is good, because then you know what, I'm done. I, I'm not wasting time, and then you're not sending emails or messages and just following up. So that's important too, because communication has always been, is always a key factor, but you got to know when not to pursue, I guess. I don't know, maybe you're a little
No,
bit better explaining that.
well, I say time is our most valuable commodity, and that's a human thing. That's across everybody on this planet. Time is our most valuable commodity because it runs out. So my thoughts in sales too is the same way, is don't waste either of our time, because I can put that energy elsewhere, right? If you aren't interested, I don't want to keep bothering you. I really don't. I
Right.
would rather you just be honest with me so I can move on. But a lot of times too, if you are good at hearing no, you're able to respond in a way of, okay, well, when is your contract up with XYZ vendor? Because usually that's almost always the reason when people say no, they're already with a vendor, or
Right, right,
I like it, whatever. I would like to understand if I get some more background so that I am able to follow up around that timing of their contract, because usually when contracts are getting ready to expire is the time that they'll entertain somebody else.
hmm,
Not always, but they will. So if you can track that when you're getting told no, that still makes that no a possible yes, but
right.
not right now, which is okay. That's called pipeline. You want to build a
Yep.
pipeline for a reason, and you want to have folks that you can continuously um, be able to reach out to without being a passive, understanding that their needs are not right now.
Right, right. I mean, I dealt with that. We had a company that we were dealing with. We were using them for years, and they were providing a service for us, and it was uh, things weren't perfect. And then I had somebody reach out to me from another company, and and it was close to, we were up on a lease on something, equipment, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just see what they have to offer. And it wound up being a better deal, and they really are accommodating, and we've been using them for like over 10 years. So,
Yep.
initially they had reached out and we were like, we're good right now. Like you said, we're in a contract. We're not ready to switch out yet, but they followed up and they said, hey, they knew we were up, and it worked out. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that story. That's exactly it. People get told no and they take it to their ego, like,
Yeah, it's
oh,
never
I can't touch
personal.
them again. Right. It's never personal. And if it is, then you probably don't want to work with them anyways.
Right.
But
Yeah, if you take things too personal in sales, then you shouldn't be in sales, because or almost any job. Like, I deal with people that get upset, they have, they might be a therapist, they might be a parent, they're upset, they have a kid with special needs, they're having a bad day, and they could get, we try and be empathetic as possible and do the right thing. We're still running a business, but you got to do the right thing. I always say always do the right thing by the customer. But I don't take anything personal, because I know they're not directing it at me personally. I'm the guy they're on the phone with, or the guy I'm on a Zoom call or something, and they vent out, and they need somebody to listen to them and hear them. So it's like, this is part of the territory. You have to listen and try and do your best to make a bad situation turn into a good one.
no,
I always
absolutely.
try and turn it, if it's a bad thing, I always try and make it a positive as best I can. And if I don't hit the home run every time, that's okay. You're not 100% every time, but you do your best.
No, absolutely. And I think something I have been really good at, I mean, it's B2B sales at the end of the day. So it's not Katherine to be sales, right? It's B2B.
Hmm.
So we're two businesses trying to do business together. So I don't always take things to heart, but I also am really acknowledgement of uh I've seen some folks where software, there's going to be issues from time to time. It is what it is. There's bugs,
Yeah.
you're growing. And if you're not growing, then that's the problem, right? So if it's always staying the same, it's always perfect. I mean, that's just abnormal, right? It's getting better with AI is able to
Yeah.
track us a little more, but at the end of the day, there's going to be issues. And some of the people I've gotten closest with have been from having issues, right? Like because I was there, because I was
Right.
listening. I have a story, and I don't know if you might want to cut this out, but this is an interesting story. I had
No,
a
if it's good, this
gentleman.
is what people want to hear, they can
I had
relate.
I had a CEO who I was sending him a contract, and he was already a client. He was just expanding, and that's also the benefit of, I mean, senior living sales, because folks will buy buildings and you can then add your software into them. So, but this CEO, he wasn't totally happy with us at the time, and he called me because DocuSign wasn't working, and he was just going on and on, and I was trying to walk him through it, and he said, DocuSign's not working, just like your software. We should call. And he named people. Oh, nope, they're not going to be able to fix it either. He's just complaining, complaining.
Hmm.
And he just kept going. And I was sitting there, and after a few minutes of him doing this, I was responding to him like, hey, I get it. I never pretended his issues weren't real. Like,
Hmm.
I always understood where he was coming from because his complaints were valid. Feelings aren't always valid, but his complaints were valid. And he just kept going. And it was kind of lighthearted. And at one point he said, you're really taking a lot of my abuse. You don't have to. And I said, well, sir, nothing can hurt me more than my childhood. So your words are not going to hurt me. And he burst out laughing. It was the funniest thing. And so he would yell at people all the time in our company. I mean, we worked with him for years, and he would
Hmm.
call and he'd be upset with folks all the time, but never me. Never me. He never got mad at me like that again, because I kind of met him where he was. Like, hey,
Right.
I understand why you're feeling this way. You're not hurting my feelings, because I understand that this is work. This isn't life at the end of
Right.
the day.
And you
So
made them laugh too.
I made him laugh. I tried. I mean, I was a little embarrassed that I said it, but it was funny. And it was trying to say, hey, man, your complaints about a software, I totally hear you. I believe you. I want to be on your side, but
Right.
also we got to keep it moving at the same
Right,
time.
right, right.
I think I humanize myself in that regard of I'll take it, I hear you, but
Hmm.
also let's keep it moving.
Right. No, you cut through the noise basically. And like you said, again, at the end of the day, it's always a human connection. You try and meet them, where they're at.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And folks are more human than you think. I think that working in corporate America, everyone is so tailored and focusing on what they're saying and really making sure they're polished. But at the end of the day, not being polished has gotten me a lot further than when I am polished, right? Because both, there's a time, place for both, but being
right.
real has helped me more than anything
I was
else.
just gonna say that being real is always good. Sometimes, people will respect you more and take you more seriously than if you pull up a false persona, which people sometimes, if you're really good, you can play it off. But sometimes if you're not, people see right through you and then you lose that level of trust. They're like, no, they're just a salesperson just trying to pitch what they're pitching and they don't really care about what I need. And then they tune out or they put up that wall. They're not open to listening to anything. And you've lost it already. So.
100%. You can't just
Yeah.
come in pitching. And I like a good script, right? Like I started in telemarketing. That was my first sales job.
Ooh,
And we
that's
had
tough.
we had a script actually. This is how I got into sales. I was a telemarketer in college. We had a script that we were supposed to read and I was not good at it. Like I just it didn't feel right. And so I
Hmm.
actually took the script and I went home and I rewrote it. And I came back the next day and I showed it to my manager and I said, "Can I say this instead?" And he's like, "Sure." I mean, this was a summer job. He's like, "Why are
I
you
kind
doing
of
it?"
remember reading this on one of your posts that you
I
bring that up
yes,
now.
I do. I did talk about this in a video, I think. And he said, "Sure." And then I came back and was just killing it. It was doing really well because it was my words, and I understood what the assignment was, but I couldn't use those words because it didn't sound right.
Right.
It sounded phony at the end of the
Right.
day. People don't want to hear that, and
No.
I always want to really believe in what I'm selling, and the way that you do that is by fully immersing yourself into it. So my lingo has to match what the company's idea is, what the foundation is, but it has to be my words at the end of the day because that's what works.
Right. Right. No, these are all great stories. We're almost out of time, Catherine. So I just wanted to
Okay.
give you a little time to wrap this up. So guys, we always say, I mean, we're going to put in the show notes, we'll put links for Catherine's book. Anything you want to plug as far as, where we can find you if somebody wants to work with you? We'll put all the links in so you don't have to write it down, but Catherine can just let us know where's a good place to check out or where to get in contact with you if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. But my name is Katherine Pack. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post pretty frequently. I try not to be too annoying. I try to keep it interesting. It's obviously sales focused. You also can purchase the Senior Living Sales Playbook on Amazon. I'm really proud of it. It turned into a LinkedIn project that took a whole life of its own. So that is where you can kind of find my heart and soul between LinkedIn and my sales playbook on Amazon.
That's great. No, that's great. And I was so happy that Catherine was able to do the podcast. I wanted to have her on, and this is a good episode. I think people will get a lot of good information and good use out of what we talked about today. So, as we say, guys, there's another one in the books. I've been your host, Vinny Livoti, for Assistive Tech Today Podcast, and again, our gracious guest, Catherine Pack, and we'll see you guys all on the next podcast. Catherine, thanks
Thank
again
you.
so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure, truly. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.